Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stuart Norris. I'm Technical Product Manager at Portakabin Group. I've got 25 years plus experience in the modular industry, and I'm going to really take you through a bit about building a modular future this afternoon. Unfortunately, one of my industry colleagues has stubbed me up, so it's just me for the session. So I'm going to do my best to try and fill the time, and we'll see how we get on. So I really want to talk about modular construction with an emphasis on the factors to consider and adopting modular construction, and how architects, contractors, specifiers have a major role to play in realizing its full potential. So what do we mean by modular construction? We mean the construction of building elements using individual prefabricated elements made usually in a factory or off-site. This can be anything from SIPS panels, so structurally insulated panel systems, to full volumetric solutions and everything in between. So we've just got a little bit of animations showing kind of assemblies, common parts coming together to deliver a building solution. This could be an office, it could be a school, it could be a hospital establishment. You know, lots of different components that go into build up that in terms of, facades and, curtain walling, glazing, etc. So yeah, there's lots of things that can happen in delivering a building from an off-site perspective. And what we're going to do through this afternoon is take you on that journey really in terms of what we look for when we're moving and going into that kind of space for delivering a building in the built environment. So really wanted to take you through just a couple of terms in terms of, just educating and understanding what we're doing in terms of modular solutions. So at Portakabin, we have multiple components that are engineered off-site. We are traditionally a volumetric modular provider. So, we are manufacturing giant Lego bricks. So our Lego bricks can be configured in lots of different orientations. The simplest form is where we're running modules side to side, and if you think of it like a loaf of bread, we have middle slices and end slices which form the big part of the building. And the majority of the building is middle slices, depending on how deep plan you want to go, but we can configure those as well, so we'll be putting 2 loaves of bread side to side and configuring it like that as well. So really, in terms of key terminology, we are mainly volumetric providers. We have done some panelized solutions, and we have done some hybrid systems as well, bringing that all together to deliver a building. So if you think about transportation is our biggest challenge in the industry because we're a 3D provider. The motorways, the bridge heights, they're not going to change, so that is a restriction for our offer. But when we're delivering kind of projects into healthcare, you want the highest theatre heights for all the equipment and services that go into those buildings. So we're maximising what we can do on the back of that trailer. And a lot of the time we're running on the super low trailers to be able to deliver those solutions. Panelised and hybrid can come into their own. So in the education sector, if we're delivering like dining rooms or sports hall facilities, we can do double height spaces by delivering a hybrid solution, so it's not necessarily just volumetric. So modules are actually highly engineered building blocks made up of multiple components, and we do like a lot of standardisation in our building solutions. So I'm just going to run a little bit of a video on the history of modular construction. So very, very short animation there in terms of a timeline, but my point with this is that modular isn't new. Modular has been around a long time in the construction industry. You know, if you hark back to the pyramids, the standardization there, you know, a grid is set out to build a structure or an object. And really, it is repeatable parts that are making up that solution. And a big thrust of my talk today is around, we like that standard kit of parts. You know, if you're setting up a factory to produce buildings, you'd like everyone to be the same. A bit like Henry Ford and the Model T. You know, you could have a car as long as it was black. You know, we really want to push that boundary, but through the standardization, we still need to give our customer base and the client, the end client, that choice in terms of customizing that building to deliver the actual solution that they're looking for. So I'm just going to take you through a few topics as we go through this, just a little bit on the legacy of modular construction, a piece around modular versus conventional, benefits of traditional construction, factors to consider before we consider a modular project, and then a bit of a summary, and then just going to finish with a little bit about the Portakabin group and business. Yeah, so we're going to try and cover this as we go through this afternoon. So you've kind of seen a lot of the history there in a very quick timeline in terms of modular construction, and it being used right across the piece in terms of the built environment. But it has played a key role in architecture through design and construction. And an iconic 20th century designer, I'm sure there's some architects in the audience this afternoon who've studied different architects in history. But Le Corbusier was a real advocate of trying to pioneer innovation and modular construction techniques. And part of his legacy was 3 essential guidelines for the future of modern architecture. And it was always about being open to new materials and construction systems and techniques, being sensitive to any new social realities in terms of how the building wants to be used and its purpose, and ensuring that that design is actually based on an effective plan that takes into account the full manufacturing process. And he really did believe in prefabrication for delivering projects and buildings. And yeah, there's the 3 I've just talked about. But I think many of his more ambitious projects never actually saw the light of day. I think he was kind of a pioneer in his day and really, you know, pushing that kind of philosophy around prefabrication and off-site technology. And the modern terminology that we're all using today is modern methods of construction. But I think, you know, I'm representing the Modular and Portable Building Association today. And we have members in our organisation that have been around for 80 plus years. So we are not necessarily new. We've been around a long time, and we've got a lot of history in terms of what we're able to deliver and offer in our buildings and projects. So many people in the audience may be familiar with this building. Its real name is the Basilica della Sagrada Familia. And really interestingly, the construction of this building in Barcelona started in 1877. I think there's some other pieces that come in on this, yeah. So construction started in 1877. And Gaudi, who is obviously the name that's associated mainly with this building, he took over the project in 1883. And he decided that, you know, we're kind of 8 years in construction and we're going to change the design and we're going to continue building it in a slightly different way. So one of the key things he did was he introduced a 7.5 meter grid, which allowed him to look at elements of the building and look at how he was going to make the building more symmetrical and efficient in actually, you know, delivering that solution. 130 years later, this building, well, it's longer than that now, but you know, this building is still under construction, and there are a lot of techniques that are still being used off-site in terms of using technology, 3D modeling, looking at off-site construction with different elements, precast concrete, and they're all there to ensure that the consistency and the quality. You know, imagine building that building in the middle of a big city in Europe. You know, they are challenging sites to work and operate, and the more you can do off-site and bring those components in finished is a much better solution. So I'm going to kind of move on to a bit about modular versus traditional. And to answer the question, whether modular construction is actually a progressive alternative to traditional construction. And if we kind of look at, why do we need modular construction? Well, we contribute massively to the economy in terms of the built environment and putting new buildings out there. And it's a growing industry as well. We've got lots of different clients out there, from private sector to public sector, delivering buildings right across the piece. And we employ over 10% of the workforce in the country in the construction industry as well. And I think health and safety is also a big challenge as well when we're looking at, trying to drive. We know it's an industry that struggles sometimes, as well as agriculture as a big one as well. And we need to improve our track record on safety. So by manufacturing, components and modules off-site, you're doing it in a more controlled environment and in a safer workspace. So just some bullets that came in there. And it's part of this cleaner growth economic strategy, which the current government have been pushing. We're looking to try and reduce costs, and not just the cost of the building up front, but that as an asset for the occupier over its whole life cycle. We know that we can produce buildings much quicker than traditional, because when you're starting on the construction site, doing the foundations, we're already building the modules in the factory. But with that comes some real challenges. And, a lot of the time when we're working with clients for the first time, they don't appreciate that our design freeze is much earlier in the process. And we need to really, engage with our client team and the architects that we're working with, and actually get them to understand that you may visit the site and see that the foundations are in the ground, but we've actually got a building sat in the yard in our factory, and it's ready to call off when the site's ready for it. So that is a really key takeaway from today, really, if you're looking at considering, some modular projects. I'd say over the last 20 years, the necessity to grow modular construction solutions continues. And we've got lots of different solutions available to us for the different markets that we operate in. And that's the same of all the members in the Modular and Portable Building Association. Some of our members have specific sectors they operate in. The likes of Portakabin kind of cover most of the bases. But what I must reinforce is that our association tends to deal with commercial buildings. So, it's back to the hospitals, the schools, the offices. We don't generally get involved in residential projects. And I'm sure I'll get a question later on why. So we'll leave that on for later. But I've kind of touched on this one already. We look for consistent quality through our factory control construction and our processes that we put in place. We're more than happy for any of our clients that we work with to come and inspect the buildings during the production phase. We've got certification and accreditation in place, and factory inspections are all part of that audit process as we look to deliver and improve. And we're also looking at buildings that are built to last. We operate in a sector where we deliver temporary buildings, but we also do permanent buildings. And we're going up against 60-year design life with our accreditation and certification. So it's no different really to a traditionally built building. And I think what we've got to look to the future with is how we bring in the youth coming out of education systems and actually coming into our industry and get excited about working with us and delivering modular projects, because the construction industry generally has had a real problem, I think, in terms of attracting the young people coming out of college and university into the sector. So it's something we've got to kind of work on for the future. So I kind of touched on this a little bit, but we've got to really look at planning for the long term. So we do demand a higher level of design resource up front to actually deliver the projects. And that really makes sure that when we go into that manufacturing delivery phase and through the factories, that everything's right when we deploy that. So we're actually realizing the building that the customer wants. And within that comes some challenges, because it's maybe more difficult for us to make changes later on in the process because it's been configured and we've set the kind of the sausage machine going, if you like. But some of the key reasons for doing it is to reduce the labour requirements, look at reducing waste, eliminating waste completely is what we'd like to do. But we are raising the quality standard, and if you think about the winter we've just had, it's been a very warm and wet winter. And we're building a product in a factory-controlled environment in dry conditions, where we've got other buildings that are getting wet through on a daily basis, just because of the climate. Just touching on a project we've delivered in recent months. So this is it's called the Bridge School in Eton, just outside of Norwich. It's part of a £120 million redevelopment of the education needs in the Norfolk area, and this was an SEND school that we've delivered with about 44 modules, I think it was. We've done a lot in terms of standardisation, working with the DFE. So we're one of the providers delivering primary schools. The DFE have been pioneering in public sector buildings in terms of standardisation and a grid. So we're working on a 3.6 metre wide grid. All the providers who are providing schools on this current framework are delivering the grid, even if they're building traditionally. So it's all about giving the teachers the best teaching environment to teach the pupils and give them the best education experience as possible. So everybody is delivering that classroom space to the same design solution. So the daylighting, the acoustics, everything within that building, works for the school and the teaching teachers in that place. One of the challenges we often find with standardisation is choice from the customer perspective. So the DFE are obviously mandating standardisation, traditional solutions, standardising around finishes, but the head teacher of the school is going to run and own that building. They sometimes have a different view, so we've got to come across that hurdle sometimes and come to a compromise in terms of delivering that final solution. So the benefits of why we do what we do, we are, these are some RICS figures from, they go back to 2018 actually, so, but we are faster than traditional build. I know they're snapping at our heels all the time in terms of taking stuff, and doing 2D systems in off-site solutions. But a big thing for us is about waste really, so we can control any waste that we generate at source in the factory. We don't want to be taking materials to site to then take them away from site. So, it's a big push of what we do. And I think, not on this particular slide, but linked to the fewer vehicle movements. So, we have a lot less deliveries to take our product to the site. If we're delivering an 18-metre module, 3.6 metres wide on the back of a lorry, that effectively is 2 classrooms with a corridor down the middle. So a pair of modules side by side give the 30 space for the teaching space for a classroom. And from a carbon perspective, we've really got to look at how the vehicle movements, how the transport, how as we decarbonise as we move forward, getting actually more off-site fit out is the key for us really. However, there are some limitations and restrictions because we make an 80-metre module that's circa 20 tonnes in weight. And there will be a limit in terms of what we can safely transport, what we can safely lift. We're already looking at upgrading some of the cranes in our York factory up to 30-tonne capability because it's not just the weight of the module, but it's the weight of the lifting frame that dangles off that, which we've got to take into account. So, and when you think about the future, when we're looking at net zero, is the material of choice timber in the future? Do we need to make wall sticker? Are the buildings going to get heavier? Again, it's made off-site, so we've got to transport it to the customer. So transport dimensions, handling and weight are critical things that affect modular buildings, and we've really got to be mindful of that as we move forward. Just a shot in the factory there, so it's a very good controlled environment. We like repeatable components, and we've got trained, skilled people who work in the factories and assemble the products, and they also follow the projects through to site in the delivery phase. So we have that consistency and that chain of custody. So the guys who have worked in the factories can follow to site, and they know what needs finishing and what stages everything was left at. It doesn't always work like that. You know, if you're delivering schools, for example, in the Cornwall area, very difficult because, you know, there's not a big labour force around there. So we may have to complement that with other people as and when required, really. Health and safety we touched on a minute ago, but really it's all about that controlled working environment. It sounds simple, but standard techniques, you know, we deliver product solutions, we know what works well, we know what doesn't work, and, you know, we've got to learn from mistakes in the past. But I think a real big thing that we push for, even in the factory, is we try to reduce working at height, even wherever possible. Just it's a lot safer environment to work at low level. Even if there's a roof assembly going to go onto the module, we prep that with all the components, all the materials that the guys are going to need to do that task, and take that up onto the assembly line and do it at point of case, at the point where it's needed. So we know there are lots of sustainability benefits of modular, and we're all on this journey together in the construction industry. We know we're quicker, we know we have lower emissions, and we're working on an industry report at the moment with some consultants to actually baseline and establish, because when we're talking about the industry, we're stronger together, and I think we need to understand how our industry sits against all other industries out there and baseline, because until we baseline, we can't move forward and promote. And what we've got to make sure we do as we move forward is make sure we're not greenwashing. We need factual evidence to back up, you know, our market and where we're going to move to in the future and how we choose to decarbonise. So, you know, timber will play a part in our modular solutions. We use a lot of steel in our buildings at the moment, and that's across the industry, not just Portakabin. But timber isn't the only solution on its own. You know, if the whole built environment started building timber buildings, there's not going to be enough timber around there to support that. And we're actually working on a project with the DfE at the moment on an R&D exercise, looking at the next framework potential of Gen Zero and Net Zero, and looking at CLT and glulam beams. And the DfE have got like a passion to try and have UK grown timber to build schools in this country. Now, that timber industry doesn't really exist at the moment at the scale that would be needed to deliver that. So yeah, there's lots of things to think about as we move forward. So real key factors to think about before using modular construction. It's not always the right choice for the project, I think it's fair to say. You know, there are restrictions and limitations, and I think we need to be clear about that when we're engaging with our clients. But we do need to make sure that you think about this all the way through the strategy, really, in terms of, you know, how you expect the building to arrive, the materials, the components, the processes, understanding that kit of parts and those components that go into the solution, really. So we're all about trying to minimize components. You know, if you can do a job with one component, well, why do it with two? You know, it's all about simplicity. Somebody's got to, especially when we're thinking about material costs always on the spiral, the labour to fit something, you know, if we can reduce and design for that ease of assembly. Tolerance is critical for us. You know, we can't afford to be delivering 10 modules a day on a site and them not going together and linking with their parent modules. So we put a lot of effort in critical areas to tolerance to make sure that if it's a 12-metre module, it's 12 metres every time and not 12 metres and 1 millimetre or 11,999, because that tolerance has to go somewhere. And it costs us money, but we put the effort in where it's needed and where it's required. So we've got just a little shot of one of the factories in York. Very simply, this is our Alta line, which makes our European products. It's a 6x3 metre welded frame assembly. And this is just a video showing the configurations going in. So although we only make one module size of this unit, we've actually got 31 different configurations of unit. It's a higher product, so standardisation is key here. So there's only one size of window, there's only one size of door, it's the same aperture, so on the fleet, the product can manipulate and swap out and be adapted for the customer without the need to change panels and reconfigure it in the future. So we're thinking about, how we're going to use that in our business, but to satisfy our customers. And with that comes a really big circularity piece. And there's another sustainability committee looking at a report through the association, considering, again, how we look at that circularity piece of our business models and how we can reuse and repurpose buildings. So that module will go onto our hire fleet. It will spend the next 20, 25, 30 years delivering building solutions across Europe. At the end of that, we own that asset and we can repurpose that building. And as long as that structure is intact, we can refresh the finishes, we can reuse that and put it into other buildings in the future. So we've got a really good story to tell as an industry. We're not shouting about it enough at the moment, in my view. But again, we need factual evidence to be able to do that, to avoid any, greenwashing. So we're looking at how we work, how we integrate within design, looking at the versatility of the platforms we offer, standardization, and really it's all about guaranteeing our quality standards and making sure we can deliver a solution with a minimum part of components. So quite often we'll have an architect come to us with a scheme. Perhaps they've not thought of modular as a solution, and although there is standardization in the industry, a lot of the manufacturers have different platform widths, which isn't helpful from an architect's perspective. So I think what I talked about earlier about the Department for Education, they've been really leading the way in standardization in the platform width and going to 3.6 grid. Once you start going above that, you start to struggle in terms of transport widths and special loads and escorts. So 3.6 is probably the sweet spot at the moment, but we're aware of what's going on in the healthcare sector, and they're looking at a 3.6 grid as well. There's a framework out at the moment for the defence infrastructure organisation sector. They're looking at doing single living accommodation. They're also working on a 3.6 grid. So this really seems to be, gaining momentum in terms of being able to deliver solutions. I think, this is just a little novelty that I've put in here, really. But we don't always deliver our modules by road. This is a very rare incident, I must add. But we were asked to provide a radar station for the MOD just off a facility off Lizard Point down on the south coast. And this was actually, there were some tracks to get to the site where the building was going to be located, but this was a 4-metre wide product and it was not going to get down there. So we had the RAF came into York, they looked at the building. We had to do a lot of calculations to make sure that the downdraft from the Chinook wouldn't actually rip the building off the change and the attachment points. And even on the day they lifted this, they knew if the wind speed got up, they were going to fly it out off the coast and then circle around to come back over the sea and come back to the site. And there was a safety line built in there to actually, if the wind conditions got too high, they would just drop the load and ditch it in the sea. And luckily that never happened, so they managed to deliver it. But yeah, a rare one, but it's just a little novelty one really to throw in there today. Refurbishment, reconfiguration, repairs, routine maintenance, it's the same whether it's a permanent building built traditionally or singularly. And we've got to consider that as we move forward, really. So some factors just to consider before using modular. Site restrictions, can you get the building there? If we're looking at a wide product, can you get it to site? We can double handle them, we can double lift if possible, but that adds more cost into the project. And it does think about the geography and the location of where you're going, really, and access as well, in terms of road transport or bridges, and the Chinook is the rare occasion there. We've delivered the first passive house building for the NHS in Coventry. It's a great building, this. It's been operational for 2 years, and it's exceeding expectations in terms of running costs and delivery. And it was a very challenging project for us. It's the first one we've done. Massive learning curve on it. But that is the future in terms of where we're going with energy standards across the different sectors we operate in. a project here for Brentford Football Club, so kind of down in this neck of the woods. This is an important building, not just for the training facility for the football club, but they're actually, using it for serving patients in the community. So again, this is actually a higher building. So underneath there is our standard grey module, but they really wanted to lift that aesthetic and appearance of the building, and it's on a long-term hire contract. So they wanted to actually lift that look of the building, and I think the other thing to say with hiring a building, it's a bit like hiring a car when you go on holiday. We all book the cheapest one at the airport, hoping we're going to get an upgrade. But our hire customers are really interested in the internal environment and that space and what they're using it for. Whereas we'd all like that sports car when we go to the airport. So just to kind of recap on a few of the outcomes. Modular is here to stay. We've got a real good track record in the commercial building sector. It is the right solution, but it's not the right solution for every project. And I think it is a growing solution for today's construction industry and needs, and everything I've talked about in terms of safety and the factory built environment and time saving options. But I think that early engagement is key, really, especially if you're new to this type of technology, understanding its limitations, restrictions, what span capabilities there are without columns, all that kind of stuff. That's the detail, but there is greater control over every stage of that in the delivery piece. Just going to finish with a bit on Portakabin. We're over 2,000 people employed across Europe in 10 countries. We've got 4 dedicated manufacturing sites across Europe, and we have been, doing this for over 60 years with the team. We do everything from single units to full modular schemes, and that can be anything from a £10,000 project up to kind of £44 million. We've got a massive school that we did a few years ago in Barking and Dagenham, just a stone's throw from here, and a very impressive project, 4 and 5 stories. We are very reliable at delivering on time and budget, and we have a price promise there where, if you're hiring a building from us and we're late, we give you a week's free hire for every day we're late. So we've got a real driver to make sure that we're not. So we're ahead of the industry standard there in construction. And, we've got lots of accreditations in there that back up our products and our performance. And, like a lot of the manufacturers on the association, it's really key that we have the badges that support what we do, especially in a world where we're considering building safety more than ever, post Grenfell. So I'd like to say thank you for listening to me, and I'd like to do something untried and tested. I'd like to ask if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to join me to take any questions. Perhaps there's some industry partners from the association in the audience. I've got 2 lovely volunteers here, so thank you. And who'd like to take my first question? Thank you. Must be a question.
Yes. Question, I'm coming.
We'll take the one at the back first.
Hello, Debbie.
Hello.
Debbie Carlton from Dynamic Knowledge. There's been an awful lot of news in the press about MMC failing. Government reports, etc. What's needed to get us over that hump, and where's that leadership going to come from?
Yeah, I'll take the toughest question first. So I'll have a go on that one first. I think, we're very successful in commercial buildings, in the commercial market, and we've been around for a long time. We started in 1961. Wernick, who were part of the organisation, my industry colleague who should have been here, their business has been around for 80 years delivering buildings. I think the model for housing, I think mid-rise, high-rise, that model is there and that works really well. I think it's in the low-rise area that it's not working, and I don't have the answer for that. I don't know what it is, but the formula just isn't working for them. There's 2 big factories that are in a stone's throw of York, L&G and Ilke Homes, who went under last year. Those businesses pump multi-millions of pounds in to try and make it happen and work, and the model just doesn't work for some reason. So we've got a prototype passive house on our site in York. I was personally involved in the project 10 years ago. We decided it wasn't a market for us. Our chief executive at the time said, I want paying for the product when it leaves the gates. So I think it's something to do with the economics, really, is probably where it is. I don't know if Andy or Martin would like to add to that.
I think the point that I would just reiterate is most of the organisations in the MPBA are non-residential, and they've been around for years and years and continue to be very, very successful. And I think that is the point. For some reason, when you see all these, I guess, these negative stories in the press, it does tend to always be the housing. And unfortunately, like Stuart, I must admit I don't really have an answer to it, but don't lose faith in the technology and the sector because of those negative stories, when there are companies such as Portakabin, Wernick, Algeco who are succeeding. You got any other thoughts there, Martin?
Yeah, probably just echo them thoughts. Martin from Ecofon, Saint-Gobain Ecofon, we're supply chain partner to the modular industry, in particular acoustics in the indoor environment. So we're slightly removed, but worked with Portakabin for a long while. And yeah, I think to echo that, it's not throwing everything into that same pot when there's been a few failures along the way. You know, I have the pleasure of working with Portakabin. They're so open to innovation, pushing the boundaries, and I think with that innovation, we're not going to get it right all the time. And it's about celebrating that we're actually willing to try new things as well.
No, my mic.
Oh. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
A question at the front.
You might have answered my question already, but why don't you do residential?
Well, we have, but we're not selling it. We've got a great passive house on site in York. It's a pair of 2-bed semis. I was blown away when I was personally involved in the project. We delivered it's a prototype building, so it's on our site, but we delivered the project in 6 weeks. And if we wanted to, and we wanted to go for it, we could turn the housing market on its head, because we made a very small module, 6 by 3 meters. And if you think about how traditional housing estates are built, people who they're built in phases, and the people that move in after the first phase are living on a construction site for 2 or 3 years whilst the rest of the plot's developed and then sold on. Whereas we could turn that on its head and actually put all the infrastructure, all the road courses in, and these small units are high above off of mobile cranes. So I think it is the funding. The funding is the challenge. It's I don't know any more than that, really. Any more questions? One at the front. Thanks for your question.
Hello. On your sort of benefits of modular, there was no mention of cost benefit. Is there, or in terms of comparables with traditional?
Yeah, really good question. And I'll be honest with you, we're not always the cheapest. We've got a big overhead in the factory we've got in York. It's 65-acre site, and we've got to think about that. When we're working with a lot of clients in, say, retail, we've done a lot of work with like the likes of Tesco's, Asda, those sort of companies, and sometimes the speed of delivery is more important to them because they can get the store operational, they can get people coming through it. We've done a lot of work with McDonald's in the past, and some of our members in the MPBA are still delivering buildings for those. But there's such a variation, I think, in project that it's very difficult. I think what we can give you is guarantee that the price that we'll quote you is the delivery price, and there won't be any scope creep in terms of that, cost to deliver. I don't know if you guys have got anything from a manufacturer, supplier perspective, or...
Give a little bit of, insight on cost, and it's at what cost. So, from my world, in the world of acoustics, we quite often get challenged on, well, we're adding acoustics in, and that's going to cost us money. If there's no mandatory standards, do we need to do it? But actually, it's the social cost. So we're supporting the environment for the people, and it's probably the same, Stuart, I guess, with the social value you're adding into that building site, less disruption to the people living around there. So it may be more monetary cost, but actually it's the social cost and value that you're adding in.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think just a point to add on that as well, when we're looking at temporary buildings that we deliver a lot of, and we're doing a lot of those at the moment because of the rack concrete problem in the schools sector, those buildings are going to be there for quite some time. So we've got a duty of care to make sure that those are the best, even though it's a temporary building, it's got to be the best education space it can be, because some of the kids going through those secondary schools, that will be their whole school life in that building potentially, and unless the government can magic up a lot of funding to deliver and build a new estate quickly. So we'll look what happens over the next few years, but I think we've got a real value piece and a social piece to add in terms of what we offer and what we do, and we really do deliver when there's a crisis in our sector. And this industry was very very supportive of the pandemic and delivering vaccination centres, testing buildings, lots of other buildings that were required because the government had to plan for lots of eventualities, and fortunately some of those never came off and weren't needed. But it's very important what this sector can do to help. Any more for any more? Must be one more question. No, all done. I don't have to tell any jokes or anything. Or
Only if you want to.
No, I'm not telling any jokes. But thank you for listening, and I'll hang around for a few minutes if there's any questions you want to just ask me in person. So thank you.